So moving on now to the bit of the pod that I really wanted to, as a chance for us to talk outside of just typical Welsh rugby or outside of the pro game. We do have a submission, but for this, I just want to bring in the sad news about Lewis Moody being diagnosed with motor neurone disease. Absolute sad thing, and possibly the worst death sentence imaginable. Slowly being shut out of your own body. Thoughts go out to him and his family and everything. Once again, it just, it's getting really hard to ignore these links between, head injury, histories of head injuries and, severe debilitating, direct degenerative diseases.
Mm.
I know a lot of these things have already been said before about, reducing, taking tackle quite seriously. And as World Rugby doing enough to A, present the risks, and B, just protect players before and after their careers.
Mm.
Yeah,
I agree.
But yeah, I think maybe it's a tough one, isn't it? Because rugby is a collision sport. We talk about, I talk all the time coaching the club that I do, and I talk all the time it's about winning collisions. And unfortunately, we're taking the men's game into consideration. You've got big men running into big men. Um, it's a arguably it's the toughest, most physical sport you can play. And there are a number of risks that come to it. And when you see something like this, it really brings it home. I don't know how you can possibly make, you go on about the tackle height and so on and so forth. Yeah, but we can debate about this for hours and hours, but unfortunately, I think it's just the nature of the sport. We need to do something, obviously, because at Abbott Leary, we got an ex-player, Mark, who runs Motor Neurone Defiance, which is a foundation there, and Mark unfortunately has MND, and to see what him and his family are going through. For those that have known him, a big rampage in second row to someone who was effectively whereby their body's slowly shutting down. He's got two young kids. It's heartbreaking to watch. And I think it's the worst disease out there, or worst condition out there. I really wouldn't wish it on anybody. Just to slowly watch as you said, Harley, to slowly watch your life slip away. It really is tragic. So, well wishes go out to Lewis, and hopefully there'll be some, cure or something soon, because it's a horrible thing to have.
Yeah, I think when we talk about like, oh, what could be done, the closest we've got to anybody who would know anything is Harley, and he's not a neurologist. But I think what I would like to see is unions and World Rugby taking it seriously and not just leaving it up to charities and foundations. I would really like to see World Rugby or individual unions kind of taking on board and having neurologists and scientists working on actually what is the danger and what exactly is, what can we prevent in a sport like rugby, and monitoring the situation, making sure that professional players where the risk is so much higher due to the standard of the collision, making sure that their brain is safe as they're playing in the same way that their knees or their ankles or whatever are being strapped by physios, making sure that their brain is safe whilst they're playing as well.
Yes, and I don't know how it's possible. I wonder whether World Rugby are worried that, the reality is that it is impossible maybe to do. I run the defence at Abbott Leary, and Eve, even at our level, I'm like, boys, we need two in the tackle where we can. We want to whack someone as hard as we can. Now, two big men against one other big man, it's the collision's massive. Even I say even at our level, some good boys lots of good boys at our level, lots of big men as well. The collisions are brutal. And you ramp that up to the pace of the pro game, and how well trained they are and how finely tuned they are, then I don't know how you stop it. I think it's better than it's ever been with taking people out, out the games, and the gum shields picking up head collisions and whiplash. But it's not just that stereotypical head collision, is it? It's the whiplash effect in the tackle and so on and so forth. And I
Hitting
don't
your head on the
hitting
ground
your head
and
on the ground, running into rucks, and blah 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 blah. I don't know whether we'll ever get around it. Maybe it's just, yeah,
It is
I don't
also
know.
like, so like progressive rugby, probably one of the biggest sort of lobbyists, I guess, of this as a consortium, and that is chock full of ex-players, neurologists, engineers, and all sorts, talking about like the actual force of impact. They do say one of the biggest issues isn't necessarily even the game day collisions; it's the training, and how do we train people so because you've got to train to take these hits. As someone who has missed training for like a period of 8 weeks, and then we went into a contact session, I just couldn't hack like the physicality of making tackles and taking a tackle. You do need some of that, but it's at what point do you minimize your risk, but also make sure that you're physically ready to do. Do you need to have do you need to spend an hour bone on bone, or do you
No,
need a bit
yeah,
less, and just maybe focusing on technique. I
yeah,
I
I
think
agree
there
with
are
that.
going to always be rugby collisions where you are going to hit heads. It is inevitable. I think what we need to bring then is just focusing on people getting low and trying and making sure they have the wraps. And then if you're having accidents, then I do feel like World Rugby could have stayed more hardcore on the tolerance, zero tolerance on the high tackle thing for a bit longer. If you think about tip tackles, like how they basically put out an edict in the World Cup, right? Bang, right. If it's a tip tackle, it's red, and and that was that. There's no talks about 20-minute reds then, and coaches have started teaching them don't do that. I mean,
Do
it's
do
hard
you
if you
think
do have
that?
to do double tackle, because I think if you are trying to get two tacklers low, then you've got an issue then if someone head into the knees, which also is going to cause problems.
Yeah, and again, from a coaching perspective, do you necessarily want that? If you can get two on the ball, on or around the ball, then it's even better because you manage to break that attacker's posture by standing them up. You jam the ball under the chin, they can't offload the ball, and you would dominate in that collision. Rugby's all about, modern rugby is all about the collision. If you don't win it or win enough of them, you're not winning a rugby game. But then I go back like into the community side of things. I coach an under 11s team now. Should there be more of a directive from a very early age for us to be doing neck strengthening exercises and so on and so forth? That's that sort of thing. Should we be bringing that in earlier so as the kids are growing up, they're more conditioned to withstand those levels of collisions? Like I don't know what the answer is. I don't think anyone's got it, but it's an interesting topic of discussion. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and I think you can look at it and be like, oh, I can't see a way out of this. I don't know what to do. And like, if we take this out, or if we do this, it's no longer rugby. The thing I always think about is like in hockey, ice hockey, goalies didn't used to wear masks. So they would just have like a puck flying straight towards their face with no protection. And when the first people started wearing masks, there were loads of people going, oh no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't. Now you think about it, you're like, why on earth would you have a puck flying towards your face without a mask on? And I think it's in some ways it's like rugby, like in 20 years' time, there's going to be people going, oh, I can't believe they were allowed to do that. Like, it's so incredibly dangerous. Um, so, yeah, if it takes like a big step that people think is ridiculous, but it's going to save people's brains, then is it worth it?
And I'd like to bring in, there's one thing of my pet peeves, and it's people who assume scrum caps are some sort of protection. And that's not what scrum cap's for. Scrum cap is to stop you getting cauliflower.
Mm.
Yeah. And
That's
even
it.
then, it doesn't do a particularly good job.
But unless you can physically insert the scrum cap up through your nose and around your brain, it's not going to stop your brain rattling around your side, because that is the thing of concussion. It's a brain injury from your brain slamming at high velocity into the side of your skull. It's nothing to do with those sorts of things. Those sort of impacts. I mean, to be fair, you can actually have a huge collision and somehow the brain not get bruised or injured, and then you can go and knock your head on a cupboard door and concuss yourself. Like the brain's weird and complicated. There's a reason I don't study it. It's because it's too complicated. No, give me something simple like how proteins are made. Like that's levels of science. Yeah, that's. I think Nick, do you have anything you
No.
want to add into this? Otherwise, I'm going to move on to our one. So we did ask for submissions. We got one from Mickey Harris. Dragons leading the way in engagement. Again, so he says, I play. Yeah, he plays for Nelson RFC second 15. They're having problems with fixtures. So since season started, they've played twice because games getting called off and other players. So this is where I wanted to bring in Dan's point about the community game and clubs. Do we have too many clubs if we can't fulfill regular fixtures? It was a huge issue with the women's premiership. Like the top level of women's below. Start to look for a pro contract. I know being a second 15 player myself, the amount of games that we either had to call off because we couldn't raise a side, or the other team couldn't raise the call off the side. Games where we were where we basically, our team manager was there with the phone playing chicken with the opposite team manager to say who's not got enough. And you think it's a club literally just across the road who also struggle to fill second 15. You're like, and even then, I get it. I get that Penarth and Old Penarth are two very separate identities of clubs. I'm sure at some point they were united, but it's split off. But is that something we need to do, or do we need to have a look at the leagues? Do we have to have, do we need to change structures so that we get people with competitive fixtures? Do we make it easier for people to play for multiple teams? I don't, Dan. You've been through the pathway at various different levels.
Yeah,
what do you think these might be?
it's an interesting point of discussion actually, because I think this year, especially in the Dragons region, we've had more second teams put into the Dragons Athletic League than ever before, which is obviously a good thing, because you'd think that there are more people playing rugby and so on and so forth. But then I've just had a message through whilst we've been on air. Apparently, both at RFC have folded this season, who are playing in Division 5, for example. So there's more people in theory playing second team rugby, but then both can't field a team to play in Div 5 or Div 6, whatever they're in. So there's clearly an issue here. I would say there's also a problem with the pathway in the game below regional rugby, in that how many of these teams run a mini and junior section, how many of these teams run a youth team, run a ladies team, whatever it may be. And if you take, and I know it's the SRC and it's semi-pro, right? But you go back over the years now. Does Newport run any level of youth or mini and junior section? Answer's no. RGC. I don't think RGC do.
No, they got just academy teams.
Yeah.
There you go.
But it's the local teams who feed into that.
And I appreciate it's a bit different up in that neck of the woods. Cardiff Rugby, no youth team or anything like that, is there?
So we tend again the academy sort of pulled from the college system there again, and then you might have someone like Cardiff Saris who play and train on at CAP.
But again, my point being is they've got no pathway themselves into Cardiff Rugby. They're not breeding their own. They've not got their own under 7s, under 8s, under 9s, etc. Pontypool RFC, no. Pontypool United do. Pontypool United run a first team and a youth all the way down, but Pontypool no, and haven't done for years and years. Aberavon, I don't think so. I'm unsure, stand to be corrected. Quins, don't think so. Swansea, definitely not. Bridgend, definitely not. Ebervale do. Ebervale got a youth team, and run down 16s. I think they're missing a few age groups, but they do. And Llandovery, I don't think they do. So you got the bulk of those SRC teams. I know it's semi-pro and maybe it's a bit different now, where they got people coming down from the pro game, etc. But where's their own pathway of players and their own pathway of talent? There isn't none. There isn't any, rather, and I think that's indicative through a lot of. You take the question from the guy at Nelson. In fairness, Nelson run a first 15, a second 15, a ladies team, a youth team, and all the way through, down to sort of rugby tots. I know Blackwood do the same. There's a lot of clubs out there that are doing that, but it only seems to be it's not everybody. So there's obviously a player vacuum somewhere. So therefore, and it goes back to therefore, do we need all these clubs? If you've only got a certain amount of clubs with the first 15, where are they getting those players from? Where are they harvesting that talent from, especially if they're playing in the upper leagues of the community game?
And what are they putting back?
And what are they putting back in? I'd argue nothing. Very little.
I'm going to say something, what I'm certain is going to be probably more get your thoughts and pictures out than my Dragon's comments, but it's the thing WRO you can do with the grant, the community grant, saying if you want to be a community grant, you've got to show that you are, and you've got to have a minimum of a senior first 15 for men's and women's, youth sections all the way up, sort of thing. You know, don't worry about seconds rugby as much as I mean I personally love seconds rugby. I like until as long as you're not taking it too seriously. For me, seconds rugby is some of the fun, the real fun stuff, because that's when you've been a backer all your life and all of a sudden you've got to do 80 minutes on the wing and you have no clue what to do. Those sorts of things. I mean that is one thing I will say with Old Pens is that they do have pretty much they lost their youth section for a while now. They've had like 3 seasons of it. I think they won their sort of competition, or very close to last season. They had a load of those players have a few of those players have stepped up to the first team now. Some are still there. Unfortunately, a load have gone to university, which is something I think does take into account. We had 30 odd players for preseason games, struggled to get 15 for a cup game. And I mean, I know I'm bad at that because I'm not in the country for most of it, but you have people who are injured, you have people going that. Some people just don't fancy having to go away.
Yeah, and I think from a club perspective as well, is if you've, I'll give you an example, like take Bargard RFC, right? Bargard play in the Premiership, good club. They run all the way down to rugby tots. I don't think they got a women's team. Now, the problem that they were having was because they play in the Premiership, when players graduate youth rugby, and let's not forget now in the men's game, youth rugby was previously under 19, is now under 18s. So as soon as you turn 18, you go into senior rugby. And I think, and I stand to be corrected by people from Bargard here, and I may be paraphrasing a bit, but my understanding was that jump from youth rugby, and we have it at Adelaide, we got a youth team, but that jump from youth rugby into senior rugby is massive, really, really big. And the higher up you play, the bigger that gap is. So Bargard's answer to that was to put an athletic team in the league. So Bargard Athletic now play in Division 5 and are probably likely to win it, I would have thought. They've played 2-1-2 already with bonus points. Now, you've got Bargard Athletic in a league with everyone else in that league, your Betis, your Harvard Runners, your Black Stars, they're all first teams. You got a second team in there playing league rugby because they needed to bridge that gap and give people competitive rugby out of youth and not lose them to other clubs. So I don't know how traditionally then Bargard Athletic would have been playing Nelson seconds, Nelson Nomads, but they're not in that second team structure anymore. They've sort of upgraded to league rugby, and therefore it's a fixture that Nelson would be losing out on. So I don't know what the answer is. I think there is something to be said about the grants, and again, this goes into whole WRU funding. Do we need to be giving it? I think it's £4,000. Right? But do we need to be giving every club £4,000? I don't know, because I would argue if you were the type of club that goes through from rugby tots all the way up to first 15 and everything in the middle, then you're probably going to do all right being able to fund yourself in terms of, clubhouse being able to take over with end of season parties and, hosting people on Saturdays and Sundays and so on and so forth. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's an interesting topic of discussion at the moment with the full restructures coming in, and I'd maybe say that probably it can't go on like this. Otherwise, we're going to end up with more teams folding and more teams with second 15s in league rugby, which I don't know. Maybe that at what point then do Bargard Athletic, for example, stop if their youth team and their second team become very good? They have a team in the Premiership and then a team in Division 1. I don't know. It's a tough balance. That'd be great for them if they got that, but it's a tough balance to strike, isn't it?
So having a bit of I think so known a little, not a huge amount of it, but known something like with English rugby in the RFU. Second 15s just get added in. Like there are merit conferences which are like effectively like the conferences in football where you know it's not really league, but you can play it. And I think the only restriction is I think 2 leagues. You know, basically that's the closest gap I think.
Yeah, in men's. In women's, there's no restriction. So, for example, Old Albanian Saints, their first XV is in Championship 1, which is the division under the Premiership, and then their second XV is in Championship 2. And then they also have a thirds, which is in a Warrior, which is like non-league. But yeah, there's no restriction in women's. You can be as, I think there is in university though, but in
Yeah, I said the Bucks leagues and things. I think there's some differences,
yes.
but I mean that is something they've got in place because they expect seconds and thirds teams to drop up and down. You know, my wife's cousin, he was captain for the Ironsides, sort of basically went all the way up to the first 15, and then basically ends up taking their 50 their fifth team. You know, and because they had enough players to go up to a 15. You know, and that was just a jokey Sunday league, but they had, and you could have gaps. You know, we play in the sort of the second division, so it's like the athletic. I think with the athletic Div 1 for Cardiff Central region, and you know we've got like several thirds teams in there. Like I think Lanharan have like 4. They might even have four men's teams, and they tend to get a number. I mean, the big issue with there is if the ones don't have a game, they drop down to the twos. The twos go down to, and all of a sudden you're playing a lot higher level than you were expecting. But I mean, that's always going to be a risk with these things, I think.
I think the one problem, just speaking from experience and having been in a couple of different clubs, and being dual reg for a while, is the problem with having the super teams like they do in England, like Old Albanians, not necessarily always in this instance, but I'm thinking of a very specific club who I won't name, is that what ends up happening is that you end up with these small town teams like my local team who maybe in that particular age grade they can only field 5 players. So they're like, oh, well, instead of them going up an age grade, we'll send them over to the nearest town and they'll go play for them. And then you've lost 5 players, they never come back. And that kept happening. And now there's a local club that is definitely on its way to being a huge super team with like 4 men's teams and 2 women's teams. And it's because they work like that. And it's a bit like Dan was saying, like, where does the youth structure come in? Well, if those big super teams that have like a SRC team then had age grade, what if they end up doing that same thing that's been happening in England where they take 5 players from this one age and like 4 from the other, and you've lost them forever, and then you lose all the smaller clubs, which is definitely a bit of a crisis that I'd say is happening over the bridge.
Yeah, I don't think there's any quick fix. I know years ago you used to have like the Heineken League teams in Wales, and then the junior union teams. You know, maybe that's something that we need to maybe look at again. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but it probably can't go on like this where maybe some teams are trying to mop up all the talent, and some teams who've worked hard, then like Ibarga's worked really hard to have a really good pathway and a full pathway with loads of kids. I know Penalta are the same. Penalta got a really good pathway, loads of kids, and got an athletic team in the league structure rather than playing second team rugby because they need to bridge that gap. So yeah, I don't know. So I feel for the guys at Nelson because I think they're a genuine second team. We want to play other genuine second teams, but they're a bit. I don't know what the answer. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is unless because you can't put all the second teams into the league structure, can you? Otherwise, it'll never work. So yeah, I don't suppose we've answered this question there, have we?
Yeah, I think it's one of those annoying ones where we can all talk and talk and talk and end up going
Yeah.
around in circles. But I think it is something that is worth highlighting. Whilst this pod ostensibly we're here to talk about WRU restructuring and things like that. It's nice to bring ourselves back down to where it started for most. We've all been involved in community rugby to varying extents. Nick, I don't know if you want to have a final word before we wrap up.
No, I think so. I think we've covered quite a lot and taken quite a lot of time.
Yeah, so I think definitely, yeah, taking a lot of time. I'm ready for my cocoa and my slippers. So all that's left for me to say is thank you, Hattie. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Nick, for joining me as ever. Thank you all for listening for this very extended pod. And if you do have any comments you want to say about anything we talked about the pod, please message us. Try not sliding into our personal account DMs. Use the WRRAP account or the subsidiary pod accounts. But other than that, please enjoy your rugby and good night.
Good night.